This program is brought to you by Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, the Multi-Jurisdictional Counter-Drug Task Force Training Program, the National Guard, and St. Petersburg College.
Welcome to Drugs and Society, the true cost to you. Today's topic is drugs in the workplace. I'm Karima Abdullah, Deputy Director for Training and Technical Assistance at CATCA's National Coalition Institute. America's businesses pay a high cost for substance abuse in the workplace. Some of these costs, such as absenteeism, accidents, and errors, are obvious. Others, employee morale being low and high illness rates, are less obvious but equally as harmful. Today, we'll learn from community coalitions how they're working with businesses to make the workplace, the community, and ultimately our society safer, healthier, and drug-free. At the National CATCA Leadership Forum, Karen Tandy, DEA Administrator, had some interesting comments about drugs in the workplace.
In the workplace, I don't need to tell you, 3/4 of drug users are employed, and they're in our market and workplace out there in America. Every year, the equivalent of 7 World Trade Centers full of people die from drug use. We spend and lose up to $160 billion every single year on the direct and collateral costs from drugs. And if you average that out by the American households, that costs every single household represented in this room $1,500. I don't know about you. I'm a government worker. I don't have $1,500 to devote to drug use.
What a startling statistic. 7 World Trade Center buildings. People in that large of a capacity die annually from drug use. We've got to respond as a nation. And some of our individuals in the country are working to that end. Today we'll be talking with 2 community leaders who are working to make a difference in their home state. Chris O'Neill, Program Manager from the Work Drug Free in the state of Oregon, will be with us. And welcome to the broadcast.
Nice to be here, Karina.
And we also will be talking with Beth Winters. Beth is from Drug Free, Pennsylvania.
Right.
Welcome, Beth.
Thank you.
It's great to have you both here. So let's jump right in, Chris, and start with you. When we just think about the comments that Karen made, what would you report when we think of how many people in society are using drugs?
Well, Karima certainly painted the picture. It's pretty graphic. The number that's used, it hasn't changed a whole lot in the last few years, is about 75% of drug users are actually working. They're in the workplace. They're not out of jobs, although unemployment, certainly there's a higher percentage of people unemployed that have substance abuse problems. There's some charts. You can see one right now that we're looking at. These are statistics from the NISHDA, the National Household Survey. It's now changed its name, but the numbers don't vary a whole lot. It's actually a little higher now. Adults in 2001, and you can see among full-time workers about 7%, part-time about 9%. But look at the unemployed, how high that is. You have to ask yourself, what does that mean? Is there a connection between unemployment and substance abuse? There are about 140 million workers out there. So those are very big numbers when you translate those percentages. But it isn't evenly distributed across the population. Another way to think about it is, what are the age groups? And if you take a look at 18 to 25, you see the highest percentage of drug abusers in the workforce is 18 to 25, and it goes down from there. The actual peak year for drug use is age 21. So we can do a lot around prevention if we think about that group of young workers in entry-level jobs and how we deliver prevention messages to them.
Well, Chris, tell us, when we think of risk, how would we really describe risk in the work setting?
Well, most people are pretty familiar with the idea that you have a safety risk in the workplace. It could lead to an accident. The accident leads to losses, either lost production time. Sometimes it also leads to the accidents leads to higher worker compensation insurance costs. These are basically losses for businesses. If you think about prevention, this is a special contribution we have to offer to workplaces. It's really the practice of reducing risks. That's what prevention's all about, reducing risks so that there aren't losses for businesses. The model that we use in Oregon, we assess what businesses have been doing around the elements of a drug-free workplace. And then we put those together in a survey to see what kind of risks are businesses taking in terms of their substance abuse prevention. We put it into what we call a risk reduction index, and as you can see, 25% of businesses in Oregon, and these are businesses that have 20 or more employees, they have all of the elements, policy, you'll hear more about the details in a few minutes, policy, supervisor training, EAP, drug testing. 27% have almost all, certainly a policy, but maybe missing one element. Sometimes that's EAP, sometimes it's drug testing. 38% have a patchwork. It's really a confused business. They don't understand at this point how they can reduce risk by adding elements of substance abuse prevention. And then there's a group that we're not sure exactly how to communicate with them. We just call them at risk. They have no policy in place or no elements at all to deal with substance abuse. So that's one way to think about risk.
Okay, now you've just mentioned elements of a workplace campaign for drug-free initiatives. Clarify for the audience what those elements would be. And also, you mentioned some acronyms there. Could you make sure you let us know what the acronyms mean?
Sure. The basic elements of a drug-free workplace are policies, and policies are tailored to employer needs. So you have to sit down and work with an employer about what their objectives are in their business, what's their corporate philosophy. So it's tailored. Supervisor skills are skills to intervene. So it isn't just education for supervisors. It's a skill set so that they develop additional confidence to intervene on what can be a pretty risky situation, substance abuse. So what we do is we spread that out a little bit to look at performance and conduct issues. Qualified employee assistance experts are another piece to it. And by qualified, I mean EAPs in general, they'll do a great job with employees that come in, employee assistance programs in general do a great job with employees that come in with personal problems. But employee assistance programs that have special expertise in helping employers deal with drug-free workplace, like drug testing policy, how to intervene on substance abusers in the workplace, helping employees get treatment, helping them when they leave treatment and come back to work. That's what we mean by qualified EAP experts. Drug testing should really receive what's called sometimes a gold standard in its application. When you get a positive, you have a SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, certification of the lab. Most labs in the country don't have that. Maybe about 50 or 60 in the country have it. And it protects a business from risks, especially in court. And finally, employee education to raise awareness. Raise awareness about the problem that substance abuse is for them or their family members. Raise awareness about resources they can use to get help if a problem develops for them or the family member, even for a peer in the workplace. And finally, raising awareness of what will happen if they violate the company's substance abuse policy, because consequences will follow from that. And those are the elements. Those 5 basic elements are the elements that have been around since the mid-'80s, and they're pretty tried and true.
Well, you've done a good job of outlining those in the tools of the trade slides that we were able to present with our audience. Could you clarify for us what EAP stands for?
Sure. Employee Assistance Program. There is a national association that certifies employee assistance professionals. Employee assistance is an employer-purchased benefit to their workers, their employees, and it's free, typically free. Employer pays for it, so the employee does not. That's what free means. It is paid for. Confidential assistance for personal problems, financial problems, even reflections on career. So you might have an interest in, well, where do I go next in my career? They also provide a very important evaluation effort if a supervisor refers someone to the EAP to be evaluated for substance abuse or mental health problem, basically to rule it out as a problem. So that's what an employee assistance program is, and many, many companies do have it. In Oregon, about 64% of companies have an EAP program.
Okay, now you touched on benefits, and I know that you've provided some information for our audience about benefits of a drug-free workplace campaign. Talk to us a little bit about that.
You bet. Mostly when I reflect on this, it's around working with my primary customer, which is the community coalition. So this can be adapted, however, to any kind of organized collective effort in a community. So, for instance, a Chamber of Commerce could look at these principles and apply them. But basically the benefits are that you get to sharpen your clarity that no one is immune from substance abuse. In the business context, that means that the scope of your effort in the community large enough? Is it big enough? Also, it reduces isolation by collaboration. A lot of times, community coalitions and other groups aren't certain exactly how to approach a business. So a campaign like this builds the relationships you need for the long term. It increases hope by action planning. And what I really mean by that is we get specific in a campaign like this. We make benchmarks and milestones. All of a sudden you can see progress. So it's not just this amorphous 75% of substance abusers are in the workplace. All of a sudden we have many more companies that have these drug-free workplace elements in place. It increases access to qualified services. I talked a few minutes ago about what that looks like in terms of SAMHSA certified laboratories and qualified employee assistance programs. It decreases risks, legal risks, through policy. Policy provides a framework for an employer to effectively use discipline when they need to and to defend it if they have to go to court. Policy is very important, in addition to communicating the corporate philosophy. Also, it increases supervisor confidence. The supervisor training is really designed to help policy get implemented well. And perhaps the biggest challenge, and I hope Cindy Ashley will talk about this in a few minutes, biggest challenge is supervisors don't have the confidence to actually implement the policy. So the training really helps with that. When supervisors have the confidence, you get better results. Another benefit is that it improves productivity by better skills. We do focus that supervisor training on performance and behavior issues, as I said a little while ago. So we're not asking supervisors to focus only on substance abuse. In fact, some employers would say that's not a really big problem here, but you'll find few employers that actually say, no, we've got plenty of productivity, you know. It also increases worker awareness, maximizes the impact of your local effort by a very smart focus where substance abusers are in the workplace, and it strengthens coalitions by partnership.
Okay, let's move now to Beth Winters. Beth, I want to talk with you about some of the misperceptions of employers as we think about the implementation of a drug-free workplace program.
Sure. The two main components when we're talking about a drug-free workplace program is obviously outreach and then providing services to businesses. And one of the first misperceptions that we have to overcome as prevention organizations is that there is no awareness of the problem. So there are businesses and employers out there that are not informed about the issue of employee substance abuse. They may look at this as a youth problem or some sort of other treatment and correctional problem, and they forget about the issue of being in their workplace. And it's not necessarily a problem with their particular employees. It could be obviously a problem with the employee's family. So there's an awareness and outreach component that we have to overcome, that misperception that there's no awareness. The other issues that we need to speak to in terms of misperception is that while they may identify that there might be a problem, they perceive that it's too great of a hurdle to overcome for them. And so when they're looking at those type of issues, they're looking at that this is a private matter and that me as an employer should not get involved with it. They'll look at such things as it's not in my office. It's in somebody else's problem. It's in the construction industry. It's in the restaurant industry. It's not in my office because I know everybody in my office. So there's that attitude that it's not a problem for them in particular. They also are concerned about legal liability issues. And unfortunately, though, that's a hard hurdle to overcome for us as prevention organizations, but it's often come through the legal channels that they're in support of drug-free workplace programs. And as we talked about with Chris, it is a liability risk, and so the courts are coming down in favor, obviously, of that component. Employer management resistance. They typically are not informed of what that means, and so naturally they put up resistance. They don't want to be out there identifying employees in particular and becoming drug detectors, so to speak, and so therefore there might be some management resistance. So it's an educational process with employees as well as with managers.
When we think about workplace initiatives as it relates to drug-free environments, oftentimes you can kind of get a sense that this may be a human service initiative. When businesses are concerned about their bottom line, how do we approach them with this type of a program?
Sure. Normally, when we reach out to businesses, we always talk about how it is important for the employer to intervene in employees' lives and help them in their health and so forth. And we don't want to discount that as a way to reach out to businesses. But we also speak to the bottom line costs that employee substance abuse imposes upon a business. And oftentimes it comes in many different forms and it's very hard to measure. And so what we do is look at such things as the frequency of turnover. Usually substance abusers are jumping from job to job, and the cost that an employer invests in the hiring and training of an employee is very substantial. And when you have those employees jumping from job to job because they're involved with substance abuse, it's a cost for employers. There's also lower productivity. 33% less productive are employees who are abusing drugs. That is one of the biggest costs for employers. It's also the most difficult to measure, but it's obviously the most difficult, expensive piece. Higher medical costs, often utilization is much higher. They're using their health care insurance, or the family member is even using their health care insurance more frequently. We also see increased absenteeism and tardiness because they're out the night before, not coming into work on time and so forth. We also see more accidents, and unfortunately we also see more fatalities associated with that. And when you have accidents and you have fatalities, you see other costs such as workers' comp claims go up. Those people who are involved with substance abuse are 5 times more likely to file a workers' comp claim.
So in essence, we really need to talk the language of business by translating the incidents into cost-related figures that we can show impact the bottom line.
Right. We need to talk about money, and and unfortunately that's what we need to talk about, and we have to be able to measure what we're doing as a prevention-based organization in those type of terms.
So tell us about some of the mandates and incentives that are available when you're working in this arena.
When you're doing outreach to employers, I usually use a top-down approach, and I look at it from a federal and then state and a local perspective. And when we're looking from a federal perspective, we talk to them about the requirements of the Department of Transportation regulations, the Omnibus Employee Transportation Act. And we talk about how that requires those individuals who are in the transportation industry to have drug and alcohol testing, to have a program in place. We also then talk about the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988, and in particular how that act requires those employers who have a contract of $100,000 or more to have a program in place. We also talk about how that act deals with grantees. Also, federal grantees have to have drug-free workplace programs in place. Then we look at the state laws, and your state laws may have workers' comp or unemployment compensation laws that talk about drug-free workplace programs or impose some sort of penalty because of that issue. And then, of course, we talk about the incentive programs. Some states, there's about a dozen of them, that have workers' comp premium credits, where an employer who adopts policy, testing, training will have credits awarded to them at the end of their policy year. There's some states also looking at tax incentives, employer defense type statutes, but right now we're seeing that the workers' comp premium credits is where employers are getting the most in terms of financial incentives.
Now we'll take a short break, and when we come back, I'll be joined by Cindy Astley and we'll be talking more about working with businesses to reduce drugs in the workplace.
Using inhalants to get high can cause things like muscle spasms, because the nerves that control them may be dying. Dead nerves might come back. Then again, they might not.
So, not everyone who gets high is going to get all out of control and end up here. I get that. But do you think you can go like a day without weed or X or whatever? How about a whole weekend? Sure you're in control? Let's go.
You may not believe anyone would just walk away from somebody desperately in need of help. But if you're ignoring a friend's drug problem, you're doing the same thing. Don't walk away.
Hey, Ellen, want a hit?
Want to smoke a joint before trying this on?
Here you go, Ellen. You want to get high? We got some great Thai stick in the back.
Smoke. Smoke. Kind buds. Sensey.
You're gonna love this stuff. It'll get you really high.
Welcome back. Joining me now is Cindy Astley, Program Director for the Community Action Drug Prevention Network in Salem, Oregon. Cindy, hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fabulous, thank you.
Thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
We want to jump right in and have you start talking to us about your community coalition. Tell us about the coalition and the work you do on a local level.
Sure. We've been serving the Salem-Keizer area in Oregon since 1989, and primarily our coalition has looked at substance abuse issues with our youth audience, alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. And through the course of our work, we really felt like we were missing a huge segment of our population, which was the adult population. We were really not getting very good messages across, and that's one of the things that led us to working on a drug-free workplace initiative.
Well, the work that you do in Salem, we've heard, is just fantastic, and as such, you were recognized by CATCA as an outstanding coalition last year. Yeah. So congratulations to you and your organization. When we think about your drug in the workforce program, your work-free program, what components are included in that?
Well, we really work to talk to businesses about the 5 key elements, and Chris O'Neill talked about them earlier. And I just want to highlight a few things in each one of those areas that we feel is particularly important to our community. When we talk to businesses about policy design, we need to make sure that businesses are clear, concise, and comprehensive within their policy. A lot of businesses have a policy on the book, but it hasn't been updated in years. It's missing new drug trends. It's missing new services that could be provided to enhance the quality of the workforce and make it a safer place to work. Also, businesses are under the assumption that if they have a zero tolerance policy, that they have effectively taken the issue of drugs out of their work site. And we really work hard to educate businesses that a zero tolerance policy is not the silver bullet. You really need to have other elements in place and make sure that the policy is comprehensive, and taking out that zero tolerance policy aspect of it allows the business to effectively eliminate drug use among adults within our community as a greater whole. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when I get to the drug testing part of it. When we talk about drug testing, one of the things that businesses have a misunderstanding about is that it's scary. It's an invasion of privacy. It's a legal issue that they aren't willing to tackle. And we talk to businesses primarily about managing their risk, and that this tool helps them to manage their risk among the workforce and really gives them a value-added part of their program. During this education, the types of testing that businesses can embark on is random drug testing for cause, post-accident. And pre-employment, like I alluded to earlier, is not a silver bullet. You may have ruled out a very active, regular drug user, but the drug user that knows their drug of choice and can abstain to pass that drug screen now is employed in your business. And with that one element, you have not eliminated the risk that you're putting your business, your other employees, in if you don't institute some of these other types of testing options. So that's one of the things that we really talk to businesses about. And then once they change their policy and enact a few more elements within drug testing, we really encourage them to roll this out in a step-by-step basis. And I have a very interesting story that happened with one of our businesses that we worked with. They are an automobile service agency. They had 5 locations in town, and they, through education with us and redoing their policy, decided to institute random drug screening. They wanted to test all of their employees at the same time on the same day. And we really encouraged them not to do that. They felt they didn't have a problem, and we said, well, what if there is a problem? Would you be willing to close all your locations today and hire, because they were at zero tolerance at that time, and start over? And they said, well, no, we're not really interested in that. So they started with one location. Within the first 6 employees, 50% came up with a positive drug screen.
What a great story. That does give us a real clear example of why this initiative is so important.
Right.
As a coalition working to reduce drugs in the workplace, what would you say is one or several unique aspects of your coalition efforts?
I think one of the unique things is that we provide supervisory training. We help supervisors see that they are not a drug recognition officer, that they really need to improve their skills of observing, documenting, and following through with behavioral issues on the job. One of the things that helps them do that is regular training. The other thing is that we have a mentoring program. Our businesses that have established efficient drug-free workplace policies mentor our new businesses that are embarking down this road. It allows them to touch base on real-life experiences, get the test and tried and true methods from their mentor, and help them along that road to success, which has been really helpful to some of our smaller businesses that do not have departments that deal with these issues. They have one manager in a sole proprietor business with less than 15 employees. So having a mentor is a really nice added feature that we've done for our community.
And the research certainly supports the mentoring strategy as being effective.
Yeah.
And most often we see it working in the youth environment.
Right.
It's great to see it being translated into the business arena.
Yeah.
You know, training and technical assistance is really near and dear to my heart. So what type of training and technical assistance do you feel is important, and does your organization provide for businesses on an ongoing basis?
We do have 2 elements, actually. I already alluded to our supervisory training. And this training is not specific to teach supervisors how to identify drug problems. It's to enhance the skills that they already have to ensure a safe, productive workforce. Take the scare out of identifying drugs. That's not what they're there to do. And when you frame it in that way, businesses are much more likely to embark down the road of drug-free workplaces. So once the supervisors have come to our on-site training, in a collaboration within Oregon, our trainer, Jerry Jesvald with Serenity Lane, in partnership with Chris O'Neill's company and Portland Community College, we have online refresher courses that businesses that have already gone through training can go online and get a quick update. Gosh, I forgot how to document objectively. I can go back on and figure out what the words are that I need to say or document to make sure that I'm doing it correctly. I forget how to follow through with an employee. I'm forgetting everything. I don't know. I have to deal with this issue now. They can go online. Jerry can give them a quick update, remind them of the skills that they learned and the process to follow through on. And that has become a successful ongoing tool that businesses can keep their initiatives going, keeping them consistent with every application.
So what recommendations would you have for a community coalition if they are interested in getting started in this work?
I think community coalitions really have missed the boat necessarily with getting to adults and asking businesses to be partners via donation only. This is a way to get businesses to be on the coalition with a meaningful, engaging prospect of drug prevention within their workforce. Now you're going to have an equal partner. Businesses are going to come to the table because they know there's something in it for them, and once they receive that skill, once they are proficient at those skills, they are going to be a coalition member for life. And they're going to support the coalition in more ways than you have ever thought possible before. So,
what a great tip. I mean, coalitions are always looking for new and interesting ways of gaining additional involvement in the coalition, and that certainly is one that's important. So thank you for sharing with us. We're glad to have you here today, and actually we'll be hearing more from you when we go in our roundtable discussion with the other panelists that were with us earlier. So now we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with more information in a roundtable discussion with all three of our panelists as we learn how coalitions can work with businesses to reduce drugs in the workplace.
If a drug dealer has taken over your block, just remember these things. He hates light. He's terrified of clean areas. New paint makes him nervous. He doesn't like lots of people around because it's bad for business. And he absolutely can't stand the sight of flowers. You can make your block unsafe for drug dealers.
When you're on it, you don't care. You're not aware at all. The way you think on ecstasy is that you're safe from anything. You'll do whatever you want. I had unprotected sex with that guy. What if I got something? You don't think you can catch AIDS, gonorrhea, syphilis? I got tested. I got HIV tested. And what makes you think?
Welcome back. Thanks for joining our roundtable conversation. I'm joined now by Beth, Chris, and Cindy. We're going to have a conversation with some more specifics on what coalitions can do to really jump in and become true business partners in addressing drugs in the workplace. So, Chris, let's just start talking with you about, if I'm a community coalition, what can I do to get started? Where do I begin?
Well, I think the place to begin is like with any other project. You have to assess where you're at. And that you have to ask yourself, do we have a business connection now? Is it part of our vision that we will influence the workforce? Are we putting a project together? Do we have business stakeholders on our stakeholder committees, you know, our guidance committees? Those kinds of questions provide us with some sense about readiness to proceed. Because the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to shoot from the hip. You need to carefully prepare. Like most kinds of relationships with business, you have to have credibility. The best way to get that is to ask your local businesses to partner with you. So we use a model at Work Drug Free where we sit down, figure out what population you want to deal with, help the coalition. Look, we actually call it a health productivity arrow, where the arrow kind of curves because the whole point is that your activity changes the direction of substance abuse in the workplace. So you start there, you look at risks that the group wants to address, you find the practices, preferably evidence-based practices that help reduce those risks, and then you measure the impact. Report back to your stakeholders what the impact of your project is. That's a great place to start.
Okay, we are going to talk about evidence-based practices a little later in this segment. But before we go there, I want to talk with you, Beth, about our coalitions who've primarily been focused on working with at-risk youth and their families.
Right.
What are the opportunities for their involvement in workplace initiatives?
Well, companies obviously employ parents, and that is the perfect forum to reach parents with the prevention expertise that the coalitions already have. Parents obviously are short on time. They are so overwhelmed with their current responsibilities, and they're perhaps not able to attend an after-school type program, but they might be able to come into a brown bag lunch program, or they might be able to come into a breakfast series. So it's a great opportunity for coalitions to bring their expertise into the workplace. It's what they do best. Here's the opportunity to talk to parents, tell them how to talk with their children. So it's a great opportunity for coalitions to bring something to the table that they're already experts at.
Oh, that's really great. And when we think about the youth that they're working with, they are actually future workers. So from that perspective, what comments would you have?
Well, you know, prevention is almost singularly focused on what they can do upstream. And upstream in the workforce, where do you begin your prevention in the workforce, is the future workers. They're in high school programs. Many communities have school-to-work programs or career-to-work. There are different phrases that are used. Those are opportunities to work with teachers and also with employers about how to include in standard job shadow activities, mentorship activities, include the basic prevention messages like what? Points like businesses do drug testing. Most businesses do. You need to know that. If you don't pass your pre-employment drug test, you don't get the job. We have policies in place about what's acceptable behavior at work, and drug use is not. We also have resources if you have a substance abuse problem. Employee assistance, we talked about that earlier, but also health care plans that can help people get treatment. Those are all things that employers can say to youth when they're getting exposure to their careers that help them understand that substance abuse is taken seriously by the employer and that there are consequences for violation of the policy.
I guess in our work as coalitions with young people, we can start that dialogue when we are working with them in other settings as well. Would you agree with that, Cindy?
I would definitely agree with that. One of the things that we ask businesses to do on job shadows and internships and even volunteer projects is, what do we expect as a business? We expect people to show up on time, be appropriately dressed, and be fit for duty. And you need to instill that in our young people as they're coming to the workforce. They're taking an eye on what you wear at this workforce, how people talk, how they behave. And if you're not addressing the idea of a drug-free workplace, what's expected and the consequences if the expectations are not met with, then your new workforce is going to say that it's not important. They didn't talk to me about that. I don't have to live up to that because it's not instilled.
Well, let me stay with you for a moment and just talk about an issue that states are continually faced with, and that's the issue of medical marijuana. What are the implications of medical marijuana, and how does it fit within a workplace program?
Well, unfortunately, in Oregon, we do have a medical marijuana card that is issued. And this is one of the elements that we talk to businesses about that's a new emerging drug trend. And you need to address that within your policy. It is up to the coalition to stay current on drug trends and how those are implicating and damaging our workforce and our businesses. So in Oregon, we have a huge marijuana issue, and it's being cloaked under medicine. And it is up to the prevention professionals to make sure that businesses understand that just because someone has a medical marijuana card does not make it legal for them to consume marijuana at work. And if it does, how does that transfer to risk, and how does that transfer into all the things that Beth had talked about earlier about increased claims against your company, increased losses, increased costs. So it's up to the coalition to keep businesses informed.
Yeah, one of the primary roles of a community coalition is making sure that they are the convener and also the broker of information as well as services. So
yes,
point well taken. Point well taken. Another group that I think we need to be aware of as we work to develop workplace prevention campaigns are labor unions. So in your work in the field, how receptive would you say labor unions are to participating or having organizations and businesses become more involved with workplace prevention campaigns?
Well, labor unions can be great partners. One of the big issues for unions right now is how to replace the current workforce. It's an aging workforce, and they need to look to new workers. In the Portland area, the electrical workers, for instance, in their direct outreach to high school students to interest those students in a career in to be electricians, to go through the apprentice program, we've worked with them to integrate, just like we do with employers, to integrate the substance abuse prevention messages. What's expected? What are the safety risks? What happens in an electrical accident? What happens to the body? All those things are real-life situations that are easy to integrate into standard curricula. In that case, we've had a lot of success with the electrical union, but the nurses, another kind of occupation, the nurses are also very active. They have an annual convention in Oregon. They bring the high school students in to expose them to the career, hundreds of them. And part of the presentation, the 60-minute presentation, is addressing the high risk that that occupation has from direct exposure to medications, which is a very high risk for that occupation, a lot of dependence on opioids. So there are lots of opportunities to work with unions if you're creative. And they're great partners. They care their family members. They care about their family members, they care about their schools, and they want their communities to be clean. So I would go in that direction.
Yeah.
Another area with unions is that the perception, and it's a misperception, is that unions are out there to protect their employees and they're not engaging in a lot of the positive things that are going on in the workforce. They're a stumbling block. And unions want to distinguish that myth. One of the wonderful things that happened in Salem is that our 911 call center that deals with all of our 911 issues in our county, those union workers went to their union and said, we need to live up to the standard that our community is wanting workforces to do. We want random drug testing. They influenced their union to ask for it during a bargaining agreement strategy, and they got it. Most recently, just last week, our Salem Police Department did the exact same thing. People want to live up to the standard that's expected of them and distinguish that the unions are not the stumbling block. They are a valid, equal partner, and it's just a two-way street. You got to work together on it.
Yeah, these specific examples really should be good for community coalitions who are watching in the audience today, because sometimes this field it's a little uncomfortable for our coalitions to move into. So thank you for being really specific, and hopefully someone out there will be able to take these examples and use them. Chris, earlier you mentioned evidence-based practices, and I think I want to have Beth talk with us a little bit about what those are, what it means, what we should look for.
Well, from the drug-free workplace perspective, evidence-based programs is really about accountability. And there's obviously some websites that you can go on to check out what the current approved evidence-based programming is available for drug-free workplace programs. And they generally focus usually on one component of a drug-free workplace program. They're not looking at the overall model that we talked about today with the 5 components. But they're a good starting point for coalitions to look at when they're developing their own materials. Obviously, employee stress is one of the issues that generates employee substance abuse. There's a model program that specifically deals with employee stress and employee training. That's a good opportunity to take a look at those type model programs and see how you can integrate that into your drug-free workplace program and be a better partner with the employer. And so it also gives you the basis also to talk about accountability. You can go to the employer and say, look, these programs are proven programs, and so therefore we have the ability to be able to be effective with you, and that's what distinguishes us as a coalition. And so it's a good opportunity in that fashion.
Any other thoughts on that, Chris?
Well, certainly many preventionists are aware of the model programs approach that the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration has taken. And they do have a website, and there are some model programs that are there now. Royal Cook, I think he's in the Virginia area, right, has put Healthy Workplace on, and now has an online version of that. In addition, there's Team Awareness, Dr. Joel Bennett down in Houston, Fort Worth area. But locally, some of the states now are pushing for evidence-based practice. We're being required to invest our money in proven practices. So there are some local efforts going in Oregon right now to take parts like the supervisor training, take parts of the drug-free workplace program and prove results down the line. Has any behavior changed for the supervisor 90 days, 120 days after the training? We have some collaboration going on right now, Work Drug Free, with Portland State University with independent evaluation to prove that. So there are a lot of gaps, but there are a lot of opportunities as well.
Have you found that employers are receptive to that evaluation component and the follow-up?
Oh gosh, yes. All employers want to know the benefits of anything they invest in. If you can show that the likelihood of this kind of change, an improvement for them is going to happen for that investment, that's their language. That's what they want to hear. If you're making an approach to a business, they want to understand the value to their bottom line in one way or another, however they say that what you have to offer is going to deliver for them. So you bet. I think that's a very positive part about evidence-based practice. It adds value to the strategies we pick in our community coalitions.
Okay, let's move on to another topic, one around the issue of privacy. Just like student-based drug testing, in businesses, I understand that the perception is that it could be viewed upon as an invasion of privacy. How do we approach businesses and deal with that?
When we talk to businesses about the employee privacy issue, we always talk about the state and federal laws because there are protections built into those laws that protect the privacy of employees. So when an employer adopts a drug-free workplace program, the policy, of course, is the foundation of that program, and it will include procedures and protocols that protect the employee privacy. And when they develop that policy in accordance with the federal and state laws, we don't see those employee privacy concerns or employee privacy violations. Private employers, of course, have greater flexibility in when they're adopting a drug-free workplace program. Public employers have a little bit more in terms of restrictions because they have to abide by the U.S. Constitution, Fourth Amendment. So therefore, when you're dealing with employers, you have to also look at where they're positioned, whether they're a public employer or a private employer. But their bottom line is when you implement the correct protocols and the procedures and implement them consistently across the board and fairly, then the employee privacy issue really becomes a non-issue. And drug testing in and of itself often has those protocols built in to protect the employee privacy and protection. One of the issues you always try to do with employee drug testing records is obviously limit the number of people who know that information. Keep those records in a secured, locked location. I mean, those are just two quick points that protect the employee privacy issues.
And as you said, they're making sure we look at standard protocols that are already in place as it relates to privacy in other disciplines as well.
Right.
And one of the things on educating your workforce about the privacy issue is that's where you may hear the grumblings, is from your employees themselves. The managers and the owners really need to educate their employees about that drug testing and our policy will be implemented consistently across the board. All employees are treated the same. All issues are private and confidential. Establishing connections with EAP services that work confidentially with potential problems that occur on the workforce is something that is very important to your employees, and you need to make that educational process very clear to them. You are not using your policy and your drug testing strategies to catch them at something bad. You're trying to rule out the possibility that something else could have caused this behavioral change. And hopefully your drug test will be negative, and it'll be something else that we will work with together so you can that employee can remain a productive part of the workforce that is providing the service for that business.
So if I'm a community coalition and I'm either interested in becoming engaged in a drug-free workplace prevention campaign, or I'm just getting started, where can I go for help? What resources are available?
Well, certainly there are local and national resources. The one that comes to mind nationally that everybody can get to on the web, Working Partners, a Department of Labor program that focuses on substance abuse in the workforce, has an excellent website. Their focus is on assisting businesses or programs actually walk through the legal parameters for understanding what the rules are for implementing the programs. But even more than that, they can walk you through in their program builder an actual development of a drug-free workplace program. You can do it online. Now, it's probably good to talk with somebody who knows something about drug-free workplace as well. But if an employer or if anyone is interested in how a program is put together, that's a great resource. I would start there, and it's up to date, got lots of good information, facts about various industries. Great place to start.
And it seems appropriate, too, the Department of Labor.
Yes, indeed.
Seems like a great place.
I would say also, don't forget about the CSAP and SAMHSA folks. Their website certainly has a lot of great information. In particular, they listed the certified laboratories on there. You know what the random testing rates are for DOT. There is just great resources and articles on that website that you can take advantage of as a local coalition to, one, get yourself up to the point where you're able to start approaching businesses.
Well, and finally, I think CADCA. I mean, what a great thought. I mean, CADCA has been there day in and day out for my coalition, and when we have a question, we go to the CADCA's website. It's a phenomenal tool, and it does connect you to other resources too. And many coalitions look to their one, tried and true location for information, and I think CADCA does a great job of kind of compiling a lot of different things that are there and putting it into coalition language, allowing the coalition to grasp this scary business topic in language that they understand, and then also allow them to translate it to business language so they can engage the businesses more easily.
Well, we're glad that we've been of service to you and coalitions across the nation at CADCA, and our website is www.cadca.org. You also can send us questions at www.training.org, which is also housed at CADCA at the National Coalition Institute. Our website is on the screen there for you. So what other things do you think are really important that community coalitions be aware of or should be engaged in as we work collectively within the community to reduce substances in the workplace?
I think when you're beginning to work with businesses, you need to come to the table as a partner with those businesses and understand where businesses are coming from in terms of what their needs are. And you need to be able to sell and have a solution for them and understand they may not have the expertise, but that's what you're there to provide for them. They might not be able to draft a policy, but you can provide that for them. Rather than talking about what features and program that you offer, identify what their needs and sell your coalition and what you're going to do as meeting those needs of that corporation and being flexible. A lot of corporations have different pieces of the pie already in place. Large corporations, for example, probably have an EAP in place or a policy, and they might be doing some testing. But you might be able to bring to the table training of their managers, training of their employees, coming in and do brown bag lunches for parenting. If you go to a small employer, they might not have a policy in place, so you might be able to come in and say, look, I can help you with your policy writing, or I can set up your drug and alcohol testing. So it's ability to be flexible and identify what the needs are for that corporation and come to the table with that issue. And that's what I would say would be the bottom line for coalitions.
And what's the greatest benefit, would you all say, there is to having a drug-free workplace campaign or program?
Well, you've expanded the scope. If those facts are correct that we were looking at, and 75% of adults that are substance abusers are working, that's an excellent location for your prevention activity, is the workplace. So a lot of times community coalitions start in one place. Frequently it's education or children. That's a great place to start. But if you're looking at a community-wide effort to change norms in the community, at some point you have to look at where people work. And when you're ready to do that, this kind of campaign is the easy and I'd say efficient way to get into it, which is some advice would be make sure that you bring on board to your steering committee for a project like that knowledgeable employers. You want an employer-led effort. You might have to do the staff work as a coalition or find a way for that to be done, but you definitely want their advice on how to approach other employers if you're going to do an outreach to an employer campaign.
Sounds like great wisdom from a wise sage.
That's exactly what my point would have been, is that you need to organize a team. And some of the best resources that coalitions have are right there in their city, right there in their coalition. The coalition members need to be at the table. You need to identify businesses that have positive prevention practices already in place. They can help influence their peers. Bring in leaders with employee assistance programs and drug testing, and craft a workplace initiative that meets the needs of your unique business community. And have your business leaders that are on your steering committee help you influence the other businesses that are not involved. Our two Chamber of Commerces in the Salem-Keizer area were instrumental in helping us bridge the gap between prevention topics that businesses really didn't have an idea of what we did or how we did it or how we changed norms, and allowed us to recraft our message to make it meaningful to business. Once business said, oh, I have a role to play in prevention. I didn't realize that my role was an active role. I thought it was just giving money. Now you have a true partner. Now you have business at the table because they are interested in something that's going to benefit them, and that partner will be there for a lifetime.
Right. And as a business, if I have a very small number of employees, am I too small to implement a program? I have one employee, 2 employees.
No, and I think it's a great opportunity that show that you as an employer cares about what your employees are doing at the workplace and obviously off duty. But the size of the company doesn't matter. It's just how much they can really get involved with your program. But I tell you what, the small employers benefit just as much as the medium and the large size employers. And oftentimes, if you're working for a small company, they'll move into large size companies, and so the habits they build in those small businesses come up into the large companies. So large companies need to be very concerned about what the practices and procedures are in those small businesses in their area.
Okay. We service a lot of small businesses, 20 employees or less. One of the things that small businesses are very concerned about is that they don't have the expertise. They don't have the HR departments and the legal departments to get them going. That's where the coalition can step in. One of the things that also is concerning of small businesses is that they have very small pots of dollars to launch an initiative. And there are consortiums that small businesses can join to get bulk insurance rates, bulk EAP providers, bulk drug testing, and receive the discounts that larger corporations are receiving all the time because of numbers. Join those consortiums. Have your coalition be the leader and point those small businesses to the resources that are going to meet their specific needs.
Great point. Thank you all for being here with us today. Cindy, Beth, and Chris, we're glad to have you. Thanks for sharing your expertise. we're out of time. But before we go, we'd like to take a moment to thank our partners, MCTFT, St. Petersburg College, and the National Guard. And finally, I'd like to thank you, our audience, for joining us for another installment of Drugs and Society, the True Cost to You.
Makes me think of the ways that we throw